Hello and welcome to the PFF Free Agency Live Show. I am Doug Kyed, joined by Ari Meirov and Brad Spielberger. Another pretty wild day of NFL news. We still don't have the biggest news story of the day, but Deshaun Watson, we're still monitoring that situation, where he's going to wind up going in a trade with the Houston Texans. We've got a Baker Mayfield trade request. He has formally requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns. We will break that down as well. A couple of big wide receiver deals. Chris Godwin and Allen Robinson both signed today. Other news throughout the day before we get all into this. La'el Collins released. He's taking a visit with the Cincinnati Bengals. Fletcher Cox, Logan Ryan also released. Zadarius Smith made a change of heart, no longer signing with the Baltimore Ravens. We've got more coming up with you. But Ari, how are you doing today on another newsy NFL day?
Doing really well. Great to be back after missing yesterday. And I feel like today might have been the most, I don't know if it's the most busiest, but I feel like it could be if we get the news that we're expecting. So the day is not over yet.
And Brad, how are you doing today?
Yeah, like you're saying, it could be a snowball effect where one domino falls and then a lot of things happen. So hopefully that happens in the middle of the show and you can watch us kind of panic react to all the news as it happens.
That will certainly be interesting if that is what happens. But yeah, let's start off with the story that we are waiting for, and that is Deshaun Watson. He still has not been traded by the Houston Texans up to this point. Seems like the Atlanta Falcons, New Orleans Saints, and Carolina Panthers still in it. The Browns told reporters that they have been taken out of the mix. So Deshaun Watson not going to Cleveland. But this news, obviously, everyone is waiting for it. All the reporters, fans, everything. But the league is waiting for it too, because this is the domino that needs to fall to set off where Matt Ryan is going to play, whether that's in Atlanta or somewhere else, where Baker Mayfield is going to play, where Jimmy Garoppolo is going to play, Marcus Mariota. It's even holding up deals in places where Deshaun Watson could wind up going, because the New Orleans Saints can't really make any deals or signings until Deshaun Watson decides. The Atlanta Falcons can't make any deals or signings until they figure out where Deshaun Watson is going to sign. So, there have been other moves around the NFL, but everyone is kind of being held up a little bit by this Deshaun Watson news. Are you kind of hearing the same thing, that teams are waiting to hear about this before they make other decisions?
Yeah, it's not even just the quarterbacks. Think about probably the best free agent available still right now is Teron Armstead. I think he's waiting for a decision by Deshaun Watson. If he ends up in New Orleans, maybe I should go back with him as well. So he's still out there waiting for a decision. And really, it's kind of crazy because Deshaun Watson, again, he's on the Texans, but he's essentially a free agent, and he literally took visits with these teams, the Panthers, the Saints, the Falcons, and they all rolled up the red carpet for him. They brought out the owner, they brought out the GM, they brought the head coach, they brought a bunch of people from the organization, they put out presentations for him, and he is literally torn on what to do. The Panthers have been trying to get him for over a year. The Falcons, that's his hometown team. He grew up rooting for them. He was a ball boy for them. The Saints, of course, it's a roster that has guys like a Michael Thomas, has guys like an Alvin Kamara. So there is a bunch of different effects on this, not just around the NFL, but again, even in that division alone, whoever gets him, the other two teams are going to be facing him for the next 10 years, and they lose out on this franchise quarterback. So many different domino effects with this, not just with players within the division, and potentially also with jobs as well, where you have a team like Carolina, where Matt Rule is somebody who, let's just face it, he's on the hot seat. If they don't get him, and he ends up going to New Orleans or Atlanta, and next year they have Tom Brady there, Deshaun Watson is there, that could ultimately be his downfall in Carolina. So many different domino effects here waiting as a way for Deshaun Watson to make his decision and then the trade to finally go down.
Yeah, and Brett, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the salary cap situations in New Orleans and in Atlanta, because if Deshaun Watson picks the Falcons and they suddenly have Deshaun Watson on their roster, they can't trade Matt Ryan until they know that they can get Deshaun Watson. But how's the whole cap situation work out in that in-between time of them maybe acquiring Deshaun Watson, then trading Matt Ryan? Do they have to trade Matt Ryan before they actually accept a trade for Deshaun Watson? How does that all go down for them?
Yeah, so they would clear about $8 million in cap space by trading Matt Ryan, and maybe they do, process that first before bringing in Watson officially, or make a flurry of moves like we saw New Orleans make yesterday. And they still do have some work to do to get to the $35 million, but they can get there to fit Watson's $35 million salary. But you talk about these are all of the various components, all the different things that teams are waiting to do. I can even speak to one specific thing: the Indianapolis Colts, who maybe are more so waiting for Matt Ryan or Baker Mayfield, have been in conversations with several free agent wide receivers and have kind of hit the pause button as they wait a little bit to figure this out. So it is impacting everything until we get that decision.
And wide receivers are coming off the board. Let's talk about just the Matt Ryan situation real quick while we're on Deshaun Watson, because that's a major repercussion of this. If the Atlanta Falcons acquire Deshaun Watson, then Matt Ryan would then have to be moved. There's no point, obviously, in keeping both of them. It would clear some salary cap space. And I would think that the Falcons would probably have to have some sort of deal almost in place right now, just in case Deshaun Watson does pick the Falcons. I've been kind of talking to people about that around the NFL. A lot of people do think that the Indianapolis Colts would be the most logical spot for Matt Ryan to land. And I think that, out of all of these available quarterbacks, once they were out of the mix or, never in the mix for Deshaun Watson, I think that Matt Ryan does make a lot of sense for Indianapolis. I think that that would give them the chance to win right away, maybe more so even than some of those other quarterbacks that are available, like Baker Mayfield, like Jimmy Garoppolo. Ari, what do you think about the potential fit for Matt Ryan in Indianapolis?
Yeah, I think there were a lot of, Colts fans who were upset that Chris Ballard was so patient and waiting. Why not go after Russell Wilson? Why not go after, somebody else? And no, we're letting it all play out. And there's a chance now, Baker Mayfield in Cleveland or Matt Ryan in Atlanta, they become available and you can find a different quarterback there. Remember, the question was always, if we're moving on from Carson Wentz, who are we getting? And it felt like, where is that option coming from? Here we are waiting a few days, and now there are going to be more options available for them. And eventually they could end up finding a better quarterback than what they had last year in Carson Wentz. One note on Atlanta, I think it is interesting though. They've been bringing a lot of guys on free agent visits these last couple of days. Jarvis Landry is coming in. Damian Williams is coming in. We always talk about how that roster is depleted without any talent. I think they're trying to bring in some guys and show a Deshaun Watson that we have guys coming in here. Jarvis Landry, a really good receiver, could possibly come here if you come here as well. So I think that's very interesting that they've been bringing in a bunch of guys to their building and try to convince them to come to Atlanta if Deshaun comes as well.
Yeah, and the Falcons did sign running back Damian Williams today. I heard that from a source. That's definitely an upgrade over what they already had on the roster and Mike Davis. So that's a little bit of help now. If they do acquire Deshaun Watson, then they would obviously hope to get even more help there. But one other element of, the Matt Ryan you mentioned, that Colts fans were kind of wondering, okay, well, what do we do at quarterback now that we've traded away Carson Wentz? I think that by the end of this, with all these quarterbacks who are now still available, I think people will be wondering, well, why did the Commanders move so quickly to acquire Carson Wentz if, weeks later we could have had Baker Mayfield, or we could have had Matt Ryan, or we could have had these other guys. But Brad, from your perspective, with the Colts, they're a team that does still have a lot of cap space. How much cap space would it actually take to get a guy like Matt Ryan on the roster?
Yeah, so actually, I realized I misspoke because there was an important part of news today, which was Matt Ryan earned a $7.5 million roster bonus today. So the Falcons would actually clear almost no cap space, but the deal going to Indianapolis would be really very small. It'd be a $16.25 million salary for this year and then $28 million owed next year. So a 2-year, $44 million deal. I mean, even Jimmy Garoppolo in San Francisco is bringing a $24 million salary hypothetically with him to Indianapolis. So they probably were smart to wait things out, let the price for everyone go down now that they have options. It's constantly just a battle of leverage, and I think they were smart to not rush a move like Washington did for Carson Wentz.
Let's get into the Baker Mayfield trade request, because that to me really does tie into this Matt Ryan situation, since Baker Mayfield still on his rookie contract, 5th-year option. He would actually cost more in salary this season than Matt Ryan. So that goes to that. Matt Ryan actually would be cheaper than Baker Mayfield. This Baker Mayfield situation is definitely fascinating to me. Obviously, the Cleveland Browns were in it for Deshaun Watson. They did meet with Deshaun Watson. They've been eliminated from the conversation, but Now, Baker Mayfield clearly got offended that the Browns were looking at other quarterbacks. I reported back on, I think it was Tuesday night, that even if the Browns did not acquire Deshaun Watson, which they won't, then people around the league still expected them to trade Baker Mayfield. So now this trade request has actually come, and we're talking about all of these same potential teams who could acquire Baker Mayfield at this point. On Tuesday night, a lot of people thought that the Colts would make sense. That was before, the Matt Ryan potential situation came up. But if the Falcons don't get Deshaun Watson, you could see Baker Mayfield land in Indianapolis. And Seattle is another potential team that Baker Mayfield could land in. I think it was Josina Anderson today mentioned that the Seahawks had some internal conversations about acquiring Baker Mayfield. And if you're talking about Drew Lock versus Baker Mayfield, you're in much better situation with Baker Mayfield there. But Ari, do any other teams stand out as potential landing spots for Baker Mayfield, or do you have a favorite potential landing spot for Baker Mayfield?
Well, let me just first off start off with the fact that this even got here, and I think Cleveland probably saw that this could happen when they decided to go out and talk to Deshaun Watson, right? You can't just have a starting quarterback on your roster and then go out and say, let's just check in with that guy and then try to come back to the other guy. It's not the way this stuff works. It's basically making him into a lame duck quarterback, which is a term that people use, especially when a guy has a 1 year left on his deal and they're not looking to extend him. So yeah, he's upset. It makes sense. That letter he put out on Tuesday night, Wednesday night, whatever it was, I'm losing track of the days. It was clearly a goodbye to Cleveland. Now, as to where it would make sense, I think Seattle is a team that makes a lot of sense simply because if you guys remember a couple of years ago when he was coming out of the draft, there's a lot of Baker Mayfield Seattle talk. John Schneider really liked him. There was at one point there was talk about a Russell Wilson trade for the number 1 overall pick. If you guys remember that, I believe it was for Baker Mayfield. Another guy who's more on the shorter side, similar to Russell Wilson. I think the Russell Wilson friction with Seattle was dating back to then already, and they were able to repair it for the next couple of years. Obviously, it was traded a couple of weeks ago, but the point is, it feels like Seattle's always liked Baker Mayfield. I don't know if they foresaw this possibly happening when they traded Russell Wilson, but I do think he is somebody they liked a couple of years ago, and they need a quarterback now. So it feels like Seattle will make a lot of sense. You did mention the report from Josina. She said that they've been looking into it already. So it feels like they are a team that would make a lot of sense, a young quarterback, type of quarterback I feel like would do well with Pete Carroll. They have the same type of energy. So it feels like it would be a team that would make a lot of sense if they decide to go there and if Cleveland honors his trade request.
Yeah, which at this point, the Browns did say that, or there were reports that the Browns would not honor that right now. I'd say that they would probably like to have a deal in place to get a quarterback before they actually agree to trade Baker Mayfield. A couple of thoughts on the fit in Seattle. First of all, I think the Seahawks were kind of getting sick of all of the drama that surrounded Russell Wilson. Acquiring Baker Mayfield wouldn't really eliminate a lot of that drama. I also thought that a lot of the messaging that came out of Seattle, we didn't discuss it on yesterday's show, but I just still find it hilarious that Seahawks PR called Russell Wilson one of the greatest quarterbacks in franchise history, which I don't think that Dave Craig and Matt Hasselbeck and Jim Zorn have gotten an emotional boost like that since their playing days, since apparently they're still in the conversation there. And just some of the other messaging, the statements that, Jody Allen, Pete Carroll, and John Schneider all released saying basically hey, Russell Wilson's the one who wanted out. They basically absolved themselves of any responsibility for trading Russell Wilson when, they didn't have a gun to their head in this situation. They clearly could have kept Russell Wilson for at least another season because he was still under contract. But I just thought a lot of that was funny. But Brad, do you have a favorite potential fit for Baker Mayfield if this does wind up going down?
Yeah, I think the Carolina Panthers have to make a move, right? They can't do nothing. They cannot enter the season with Sam Darnold as their starting quarterback, and kind of a loose connection. But Matt Rule was coaching at Baylor for the last season when Baker Mayfield was at Oklahoma. So that Big 12 connection, there are some connections there. And then you do something. So, I think that's a potential option for them. He obviously, like you said, ESPN's Jake Trotter came out and said they're currently not intending on honoring his trade request. But as you've been saying, I'm sure they would if something materializes. And I think he could garner potentially a day 2 pick. We saw Darnold go for a 2nd, 4th, and a 6th. I'm not sure why Baker wouldn't have a similar market.
Yeah, and before we wrap up this conversation on Baker Mayfield, if the Browns do trade Baker Mayfield, then they need a quarterback. I think that the one that I've heard the most as a potential option would be Jimmy Garoppolo. I think that there's a debate over whether Jimmy Garoppolo is an improvement over Baker Mayfield on the field. But I think it was Chris Mortensen who reported yesterday that the Browns want an adult in the quarterback room. And, say what you will about Jimmy Garoppolo's play on the field. He's known as one of the best locker room leaders in the NFL. His teammates with the 49ers absolutely love him. So, I think it would be kind of a shift in personality, at least, of them acquiring Jimmy Garoppolo, trading away Baker Mayfield, even if it wouldn't necessarily make their team on the field significantly better. Sometimes just a location shift for these quarterbacks can make the situation a little bit better. So, Ari, beyond Jimmy Garoppolo or including Jimmy Garoppolo, what do you think about potential fits for the Browns if they do trade away Baker Mayfield?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably also worth mentioning Case Keenum is on that roster. Case Keenum was with Kevin Stefanski when they went to the NFC Championship game. He's a quarterback that they paid. I believe it was $7 or $8 million guaranteed last year. I don't think he would be a plan B, but I think he could be potentially a plan C or D if they believe that Jimmy Garoppolo is too expensive, or they're not comfortable with the shoulder surgery, or they would have to extend it because he's on a 1-year deal, whatever it is. But there could be also the Matt Ryan scenario where if it's not Indianapolis and Deshaun Watson goes to Atlanta, that could be a potential quarterback there. Again, Cleveland, this is a team that made the playoffs 2 years ago. They obviously didn't have a good year last year, but Baker played from week 2 on with a shoulder injury that was clearly bothering him. It is a roster that is still really good. They just added Amari Cooper to this roster. They need a viable quarterback option there. And if it's not Baker and it's not Garoppolo, I think Matt Ryan could be another name to keep an eye on, especially if it's not going to be the Colts, assuming Deshaun Watson goes to Atlanta. Again, so many different quarterback dominoes here that have to fall. It's Watson first, but if that happens, a lot more is going to go down, as you just see by what I just said.
Yeah, and Brad, what do you think about the current roster construction in Cleveland? Because it does feel like they would at least need some sort of veteran, whether that is Case Keenum or Jimmy Garoppolo, Matt Ryan, someone in there to at least bridge the gap to a potential rookie, because this doesn't feel like a team that's starting over here.
That's the thing, right? I mean, they do pick 13th overall, which I think is a pick that in this year's class could probably get you potentially a Kenny Pickett, maybe a Malik Willis if you like one of those prospects, maybe a short trade up to get one of those guys, but very attainable. But it's such a good roster. I mean, they have obviously a very highly paid Myles Garrett. Denzel Ward at cornerback maybe gets an extension this offseason. You look at some of their free agency additions last year, and you got to think, paying both of their guards this season among the highest paid players of their positions. You would think they're trying to compete and contend right now and aren't trying to wait. So I agree with you.
All right, let's get into some wide receivers now that we've talked about quarterback. Oh, one more thing about quarterbacks. I failed to mention this with Matt Ryan. I do think that if the Colts acquired a guy like Matt Ryan, they could still draft a quarterback, and Desmond Ridder is a player to watch there if the Colts do wind up drafting a quarterback. Let's get into wide receivers. 2 notable deals since we had our last show. Chris Godwin, who was franchise tagged, signed a 3-year, $60 million contract with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That is the same exact deal that Mike Williams signed with the Los Angeles Chargers. And it was the same agent, Tory Dandy of CAA, that negotiated both of those deals. So I thought that was interesting and notable. Also, Allen Robinson signed a 3-year deal with the, surprise, surprise, Los Angeles Rams for $46.5 million. That includes $30.7 million guaranteed per Tom Pelissero. I find, we can get into Godwin, or you guys can get into Godwin a little bit, but I find the Allen Robinson deal to be pretty fascinating. The Rams just acquire talent. Like, they don't, I feel like when they acquire players, they aren't saying, all right, well, how is he going to fit into this role? How's he going to fit into this role? Obviously, Allen Robinson will be a great X receiver for the Rams, but that's a team that's already got Cooper Kupp. They've already got Robert Woods. He's coming off a knee injury. They've already got Van Jefferson. There's a report from someone out there today, I forgot who it was, that they're still in the mix to re-sign Odell Beckham Jr. So, I mean, they're about to have, if that all goes down, they're about to have 5 better wide receivers than some teams have as their top wide receiver this season. It's just really fascinating to see how the Los Angeles Rams build. But I do think that that's a good bargain for a player like Allen Robinson. And I think that we're going to see those wide receiver deals continue to, go up in years going forward. So, signing Allen Robinson for whatever it is, $15.3 million or something like that a year could wind up looking really smart down the line, even if that is a crowded wide receiver room in Los Angeles. Ari, what stood out to you about both of these wide receiver deals?
Yeah, I mean, the Allen Robinson one is definitely the one that surprised me a little bit just because of the destination. And again, the Rams are just so good at hiding at what they're doing. Whether it's the Von Miller trade, the Odell Beckham signing, which came out of nowhere last minute, all these different things that they do. The Stafford trade, it just comes out of nowhere. But Allen Robinson was a free agent who really last year with Chicago, the franchise tag, not really negotiating, got him upset, did not have a great year, whether it's the quarterback player or whatever it is, or it's being in Chicago, whatever it was. His market just wasn't where it was supposed to be. It sounds like he had a couple of one-year deals out there. The Detroit Lions pursued him. Then they went after DJ Chark. It didn't work out. The Rams swoop in. Obviously, yesterday, all day, they were working on trying to get a Von Miller deal done. They failed or just couldn't match what the Bills were doing. They had a lot of money left over. Let's go out and find out a free agent. Who is it? Allen Robinson. They go out and give him a call, and they were able to work out a multi-year deal. That means they're committing to him, not just a one-year deal, get back to the market next year. You're going to be here for a while, Allen. You're going to be with a quarterback in Matthew Stafford after having Blake Bortles and Mitchell Trubisky and Hackenberg in college, whatever it is. Matthew Stafford, a Super Bowl winning quarterback, a Super Bowl MVP quarterback. I don't know how his target shares will be in LA, but you're going to be winning a lot. You'll be around a lot of great receivers, and it's a great fit. And again, he didn't get the $20 million a year that he wanted, but he's entering a great situation with a great team. And again, the Rams surprised us with a splash signing here. And again, Odell might also come back. I believe it was Schefter who said that. And if he comes back as well, holy God, that receiver room is just insane.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned didn't get the $20 million that he probably wanted, that other wide receivers on the market got. But I was even hearing the possibility that he would sign like a 1-year, $12 million deal or something like that. So he was pretty smart to wait this out as long as he did. Brad, two interesting kind of contract notes here. First of all, are you surprised at all that Allen Robinson didn't get the $20 million that, Chris Godwin, Mike Williams, Amari Cooper are all sitting with? And the other element of this is that both these guys were franchise tagged, and then they wind up signing long-term offers after a year. Is that, the path that we might see with some of these wide receivers moving forward here?
So I would say, to the point of the surprise, I'm not surprised. Like you guys, I had heard some smaller offers, and I also think, in a general sense, teams are more comfortable paying a second contract than a third contract. It sounds kind of reductive. The ages are similar for a lot of these guys, but that is the reality of the situation. And I actually think the Robinson deal is kind of fascinating if you want to look at the value from an absolute value versus a relative value perspective. What I mean by that is, when I'm looking at markets and how guys are getting paid, what I care more about is relative to the rest of the league or relative to what other offers were, where does this come in? From that perspective, maybe this isn't the strongest deal from the Rams. But you look at a guy that last offseason, if someone gave him $20 million per year coming off the years he was having with bad quarterback play, none of us would have blinked an eye, right? And so from that absolute value perspective, it could be a great contract. Matthew Stafford has made guys like Kenny Golladay a lot of money at that big-bodied outside X receiver position. So I do like it, even though, I think there may not have been other offers in this range for him.
Absolutely. Let's do before we get to our free agency roundup, I did want to tell you guys about a promo code that we've got going on at PFF. Use free agency 30 for 30% off any PFF subscription. Once again, that's free agency 30 for 30% off any PFF subscription. I know how much I use our grades. You can read all of our great features that go up on pff.com. So absolutely, our fantasy, our betting, everything 30% off using free agency 30. Absolutely recommend that. Let's get into a quick free agency recap roundup here. All the other deals that have gone on, I mentioned a lot of them at the top, but La'el Collins released by the Cowboys, Fletcher Cox released by the Eagles, Logan Ryan released by the New York Giants. A lot of names entering the free agency market. We also saw Zadarius Smith, who was released by the Packers, agreed to terms with the Ravens, then backed out. He's back in free agency now at this point. You see that right now is reported just a day ago that he was going to be signing with the Ravens. Plot twist, no longer doing that, according to Ian Rappaport. So I think that that's the most interesting one, is that even on this show last night, we were talking about, wow, what a great signing by the Ravens. They wound up signing Zadarius Smith for, less than $10 million a year. This is what the Ravens do. Won't count against the compensatory pick formula. Now, we don't really know what's going to be going on there, but we do know that there's a lot of teams out there that could use pass rushers, and teams that, might not have expected to need pass rushers heading into free agency. I thought that the Rams thought that they probably had a very good shot of landing Von Miller. He goes to the Buffalo Bills. The Dallas Cowboys had a deal in place to bring back Randy Gregory. He went off to the Denver Broncos. So I think that for Zadarius Smith, this probably makes a good deal of sense to say, okay, well, let's actually wait to see what other offers I have out there and see if I can do a little bit better than what the Baltimore Ravens were offering. But Ari, whether it was Zadarius Smith or one of these other deals, what really stood out to you from the rest of free agency?
Yeah, let me just start off with Zadarius Smith. From my understanding, the news that he was going to the Ravens was not supposed to go out. He never agreed to that deal. And for some reason, his agents put it out there that the deal is done or he's committing to sign there. And he was not happy about that. And that's kind of what happened here. He's been going back and forth with them about this. And he ended up saying, no, I do not want to go there. I do not want that deal. And he's back on the market there. That is what I understand as to what happened there. And that's where I guess the plot twist happened. But it looks like he never initially agreed to it. He never said, I'm going there. The offer was on the table, but it was never agreed to officially by him. And that's where the holdup was. And then this morning, he said, I'm officially not signing that deal with them. There's still a chance he could go back to them, but I don't think that's going to happen eventually. I don't think it's salvageable. We'll see what happens there. As for some other ones, I'm really curious to see what happens with La'el Collins. I mean, a top-tier right tackle who has done a tremendous job in Dallas. Obviously, the way he got into the league was quite a story. He ended up going undrafted, but Dallas signed him as an undrafted free agent there's reasons behind it. You guys could look into it, but he ends up going there, immediately makes an impact, has been there for several years, and now they move on from him as a post-June 1 cut for salary cap purposes. It made more sense to cut him instead of trading him for a late-round pick like they did with Amari Cooper for salary cap purposes, which Brad could probably get into. But I'm really curious to see what his market is, because I think he's going to have a huge market. As you mentioned, he is visiting the Bengals, and as we know, when it comes to these free agent visits, when a guy gets into your building, and if you want that guy, you don't let him leave the building. And the Bengals need offensive line help. They need offensive line help at the right tackle position. And there's nobody better right now to get than La'el Collins. So he's going there tonight. He'll be there all day tomorrow, meeting with coaches, meeting with the executives, and his agent will try to potentially hammer out a deal. And if he ends up there, I mean, Cincinnati has completely changed up their offensive line, which was clearly their biggest issue entering this offseason.
Yeah, that would be a huge move. Another visit out there is Trent Brown. I don't think it happened today because it wasn't on the wire, but he's visiting the Seattle Seahawks. I think that Josina Anderson's the one who put that out. So lots of good tackles actually still available. Obviously, Teron Armstead, we mentioned him off the top too. But Brad, is there a deal, a release, something else that went down on a pretty busy day that really stood out to you?
Yeah, I think the two we're talking about are really fascinating. The La'el Collins move, he missed all of 2020 with an injury and then did have a 5-game suspension in 2021. But from 2019 to now, he had the second highest run blocking grade among all tackles per our grading at 90.7 overall. So a really, a difference maker for that offensive line potentially in Cincinnati. I think that Zadarius Smith is really interesting as well. Changed representation last year after not being happy about the automatic conversion language in his contract with Green Bay. So that's a bit of an interesting note there. And I tend to believe he watched our show yesterday, and we said it was one of the best deals signed in free agency. It earned a rare elite grade on our live deal grader because it was that good. And I think after that news came out, even though it wasn't true apparently, we then saw Von Miller. We then saw Chandler Jones sign. So it makes sense that he reversed course there. But as you mentioned, I think the big storyline is there are still a lot of really good players available, guys that have also been cut recently. You mentioned Trent Brown with a reduced contract there. There's a lot of names you go down the list of good, high-caliber players. Matt Ioannidis in Washington, a surprise cut to himself, apparently. There are talented players out there. We are definitely not done with free agency.
So Ravens, if you want to blame someone for Zadarius Smith not winding up in Baltimore, I think it's Eric Eager who said that was his favorite deal. Right. So, send all the tweets, the hate mail, everything to Eric Eager. It wasn't us. Maybe it was Ari's fault for not being on the show, and it was Eric filling in for him. But beyond that, send your hate mail to Eric Eager there. Let's get into, good segue there, mailbag questions that we've got on today's show. We're going to pull up our first question here any moment. Here we go. Thank you, producer Tyler. If Aiden Hutchinson goes number 1 to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who will the Lions take? And the Lions pick at number 2 overall. We've actually got some breaking news. The Las Vegas Raiders, this is from Ian Rappaport, are in the final stages of trading for Packers star wide receiver Davante Adams, who receives a new contract that makes him the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL, a blockbuster. Las Vegas sends back a first-round pick, potentially more picks, and a player. Yeah, this Davante Adams, he's got the connection with Derek Carr from their days in college. This is still a absolute shocker to me, just because they're bringing back Aaron Rodgers. Now, the Packers' weapons, especially that wide receiver core, is severely depleted. There's still a possibility that they could re-sign Marquez Valdes-Scantling. They brought back Alan Lazard, but they're really lacking in that number 1 wide receiver, that number 1 target for Aaron Rodgers in that offense. And you'd think, getting Aaron Rodgers to agree to come back, that there would be, some sort of deal in place to have Davante Adams staying in Green Bay, but that is clearly not the case. Las Vegas Raiders had a bunch of cap space, and now they pull off a deal for an absolute superstar. Brad, what's your initial reaction to this?
This is completely shocking news to me. So obviously the Packers do clear $20 million in cap space, which is what his franchise tag number was. But what are they going to do? Who is Aaron Rodgers going to throw the ball to? I do not know. Sounds like Adams will probably get $27.5 million per year, if not more, to reunite with his college quarterback and Derek Carr. The Raiders going from Chandler Jones to Davante Adams, 2 massive moves. The AFC West is maybe the best division I've ever seen in the NFL.
Yeah, Ari, what is your initial reaction to this?
It's funny because there were just rumblings of this, and I never bought into it because, especially after Aaron came back, it's like, how in the world do you split these 2 guys up? And now they've been split up. So I don't think, Brad, could they undo that contract that he signed last week? I don't think so, right? That's officially
signed. There was a delay the first time, so maybe it didn't get filed again the second time.
Could we have another Aaron Rodgers saga start now? Could that happen? Wow, it's shocking. But again, we discussed this about the contract. DeAndre Hopkins is at 27. People don't believe it's a real 27. Adams wanted the 27, and he's getting an average of 28. So he got what he wanted from the Raiders. He's not getting it from the Packers. He's been traded. The Packers get, looks like a first-round pick and more. And the offseason is getting even crazier. It's a 5-year deal with a $28 million average. So he got the bag, as they would say.
Yeah, he wanted to be the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. There were rumblings that it could be up to $30 million per year. But yeah, $28 million per year for Davante Adams is extremely solid there for him. And this is I think that people were thinking that the Raiders might be the odd men out in that division with everything that all these other teams have made, the Chiefs, the Chargers, the Broncos obviously acquiring Russell Wilson, but now the Raiders have signed Chandler Jones. They're trading for Davante Adams, a 5-year deal, $28 million per year. This is putting them right back in the mix with those other teams. And I think we were even saying it on yesterday's show, the Chiefs might actually wind up looking like the weakest team in that division after all is said and done. And once we get into the season, we'll see how Patrick Mahomes plays. But this gives Derek Carr an absolutely incredible weapon in Davante Adams, and that's what he really needed. But that offense is totally loaded now. Josh Jacobs, Davante Adams, Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow. So this is definitely the best pass catching arsenal that Derek Carr has ever had. But Brad, where do you think that the Raiders now stack up with the rest of that division?
Yeah, I mean, this is a massive move because they do have some good auxiliary pieces. Obviously, Darren Waller, one of the better tight ends in the NFL. Hunter Renfrow, a good receiver operating underneath. You bring in the best wide receiver in the NFL on top of that. Probably going to now extend Derek Carr as well. I mean, at least on the offensive side of the football, they need some help on the offensive line, but they can at least try to keep up with these crazy offenses in their division. And then, Max Crosby and Chandler Jones is a pretty darn good, edge rusher duo as well. So the arms race of the AFC West is something I feel like we've never seen before.
I think that this is interesting. We'll get into our last segment here, the best available free agents, because that I think ties into the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm curious to see if now they pull off a move for someone like Stephon Gilmore to really improve that secondary, or if they can get some of these other free agents that are out there available right now. Ari, are there any free agents available right now that really stand out to you, either that could help the Raiders or just that you're surprised are available in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of mentioned the name that I was thinking about, Stephon Gilmore, and Richard Sherman on our podcast network here mentioned that Stephon Gilmore is looking to go to the West Coast. I'm looking right now at the AFC West, and I'm looking at the receivers that are out there, and you mentioned Davante Adams now going there as well. I think being Davante Adams' teammate in Las Vegas going to the West is a very intriguing team for Stephon Gilmore. He's been a free agent now for a couple of days. Obviously, he's been an All-Pro. He won Defensive Player of the Year. He's still out there. Clearly looking for a contract that would pay him significant money. The Raiders were quiet to start off, and it's clear why now. They were looking to sign Chandler Jones and Flip Ngakwe. They clearly were looking to get Davante Adams, a deal that's been clearly been working on for a while now. It's not something that happens overnight. And I don't think they're done adding firepower to this team because they're clearly going all in. Derek Carr's in the final year of his contract. Like Brad said, extend him. But now that they've pushed their chips to the middle by getting Davante Adams, giving up a first-round pick, by getting a Chandler Jones, I don't think they're done. I think they look at the AFC West, look how stacked it is, look at Khalil Mack, Russell Wilson, and all these guys coming in. We got to add more. So I don't think the Raiders are done at all.
And Brad, I guess on this same topic of best available free agents, is there someone now that stands out to you for the Packers? Because a lot of those top wide receivers are now off the board. Robert Tonyan is still available at tight end. Just like, how do the Packers now pivot to stay competitive? Because clearly the idea of signing Aaron Rodgers to this deal was to win Super Bowls, was to be competitive, to be one of the top teams, if not the best team in the NFC. So where can they possibly even go from now from here to be competitive like they hope to be in the future?
Yeah, I mean, you need multiple players to replace Davante Adams, frankly, unless you somehow trade for another guy of his caliber, which doesn't seem likely. I think Marquez Valdes-Scantling potentially returning is one thing. And I guess I'll just throw a name out there. We've been talking about Houston a ton. If they do move on from Deshaun Watson, maybe they go full fire sale. Maybe wide receiver Brandon Cooks can also become available via trade. He could maybe go to Green Bay to try to fill that gap a little bit. But this, I think, is going to have ripple effects. This changes the entire complexion of the NFC once again. These two conferences are just in two stratospheres right now.
Yeah, I think that the biggest winner in all of this is a guy named Tom Brady, who decided to come back from retirement and decided to play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because he's either going to be sleepwalking or it's a cakewalk into the Super Bowl at this point. It depends on which walk you prefer. But yeah, I mean, just as far as wide receivers go too, there were rumors that Odell Beckham Jr. Could be going to the Green Bay Packers during the trade or after he was released by the Browns last year. I guess that would still be a possibility if he doesn't wind up going to the Rams. Antonio Brown is still out there. I'm not sure if any team really wants to sign a guy like Antonio Brown. Julio Jones available, could wind up helping out a team like the Packers. Juju Smith-Schuster, Jarvis Landry. I mean, these are all good wide receivers, but I feel like you would need two of them to replace someone like Davante Adams. Any final thoughts on this day, on this deal, on anything? Ari, I'll start off with you.
Yeah, my final thoughts are we're not done yet. I think there's more coming. I think the Deshaun Watson news is obviously the one we're all waiting for. The Devontae Adams news just came. But if you guys thought today was insane, I don't think we're done yet. Let's just end it off like that.
Yeah, I first saw the first tweet I saw before I saw that it was Devontae Adams was just everyone raving about the AFC West. So I was like, what happened? Did Deshaun Watson go to the Raiders or something? What's going on here? Of course, I should have known it was Devontae Adams going to the Raiders and making that division even stronger. But Brad, any final thoughts from you on today?
Yeah, I mean, it's just to move in two different directions is very tough like this for a franchise. To both be trying to run it back and do all these things and also lose, you're the second best player on your team. I've probably said the same thing 3 segments in a row now, but I just think there is so much more activity that's going to come now. Green Bay has to make moves. Everyone else kind of has to make moves in response. You mentioned the NFC as well. Yeah, I mean, Tom Brady, the guy, the Red Sea just seems to part for that guy every year, good for him, I guess.
I will say one final thing, too. I know that a lot of Raiders fans probably were not overly enthusiastic when they decided to hire Josh McDaniels, Dave Ziegler. I think a lot of people were saying, okay, well, it's another, Patriots coaching tree, GM tree. What could happen here? I think that this is the type of deal that really does a very good job in winning over a fan base, bringing in a guy like Devontae Adams who will seriously help out Derek Carr. But thank you guys for watching. Keep it on PFF.com for all of your news and analysis. We've got some great trackers going there on PFF.com. Use promo code FREEAGENCY30 for 30% off any PFF subscription. Follow Ari on Twitter at MySportsUpdate. Follow Brad on Twitter at PFF_Brad. Throw me a follow at Doug Kyed. And as Ari said, I think the craziness is just beginning. We had one of the biggest deals of the offseason, and we haven't even seen Deshaun Watson traded yet. So lots to still happen. We will be back with you guys again tomorrow, Friday at 7 p.m. for our final free agency live show of the week.